Now, children are suffering from high levels of anxiety about the threat of terrorism. That's according to a report which says media coverage of terror attacks can leave young people with an exaggerated fear of becoming victims. The study found that amongst 11 to 16-year-olds, terrorism was a bigger worry than issues like bullying, racism, or even cruelty to children. And that's despite the fact that, as we know, terror attacks are incredibly rare. So how can we help young people put these events into context? Well, joining me now is James Davis from the charity Childwise, which carried out this research, and psychologist Honey Lancaster-James. Good evening to you both.
Good evening.
And James, as somebody, you are behind this report. Why, first of all, did you decide to go out and look into this?
Well, we do a lot of research with children each year, and 2015 we asked them what their biggest worry was, their concern, and it was the personal, as you would expect, all the issues you talked about. But when we did it this year, we found it was war and terrorism, so there's been a definite shift in terms of what their biggest worry is.
I imagine it's because of what happened last year. Last year, a number of the terror attacks that happened in the UK. I mean, how worrying should we be that how affected children are by this? If you said you've seen this shift in a couple of years, that is really worrying.
Well, I think obviously all terrorist incidents are worrying, but I think Manchester was particularly bad for kids because it targeted kids and an artist that they particularly liked.
Honey, what can parents do, what can children do to make sure that these kids aren't dealing with unnecessary anxiety?
I think it's so difficult, isn't it? Because a lot of the time they're hearing about what's happening through social media, just because they're interacting with their friends online, and then people are sharing things. So it's very difficult to kind of protect your children and wrap them in cotton wool and keep them away from the news. So I think it probably comes down to how you talk to your children about what they're exposed to and what they're hearing about, and to try to let them know that, of course, what's happened, whether it's an attack at a concert, whether it's something else, let them know that, of course, it's awful, but it's also very, very rare. And that's why it's on the news, because it is so unusual. Because I think one of the things that children tend to do is they overestimate the chances of that happening to them. And particularly when you had things like the Manchester attacks that seem so relevant to them and so like the kind of thing they might have been engaged in. But of course, just to be aware as well that because children now are typically on smartphones and they're on the internet in their own bedrooms, when they're actually finding out about these events, they're often in a very kind of safe place, and that unfortunately can get in a little bit more sort of intimately, if you like, because they're at home often when they hear about these things.
I mean, James, one of the interesting things about the report, you know, when I first started reading, I thought this is going to be maybe the role that us as the media play, which is why maybe children are getting more anxious, because obviously we're reporting on terror attacks. But interestingly, it was the conversations they were having in the playground with their schoolmates.
Yes, absolutely. As you know, media's changed so much. Kids aren't necessarily watching TV news. Many do, but not all of them. They'll be getting it online, they'll be getting it, their friends and their family.
So how do you deal with something like that? Because your child potentially then could be bothered by events and they might not be talking to you about it. So do you have to start maybe that uncomfortable conversation to find out if they are bothered in a certain way?
I think one of the things perhaps is about going a little bit back to some of those traditional ways in the family of trying to have, say, your evening meal together so that you can talk rather naturally and not in an intense way. What have you been talking to your friends about at school today? But you can maybe have like a daily check-in with each other, maybe have breakfast together so you can say, is there anything that you've heard or anything you want to talk to us about, so that you are getting involved in those conversations. But it is very difficult because children are going to go to school and they are going to talk to each other. And in perhaps times gone by, they might have been saying, oh, the bogeyman's going to get you. But now, of course, it's, you know, I saw this on the news or I saw this on my Facebook feed. And it's becoming all the more real to them.
And James, really quickly, from the research you've been doing throughout the years, how do we get kids back to that 2015 level where their biggest worry was, you know, maybe, you know, what they're going to be wearing?
Interestingly, after they're 16, they start to worry more about the personal again. So it's particularly that group, 11 to 14, where the world is suddenly opening up for them. I think it's absolutely right, is the parents must talk to them and say the chances are very, very low. And I think that's what's important.
OK, really, really interesting stuff. James and Honey, good talking to you both. Thank you.
Thank you.